And welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Maria Ramos. Tensions near one of the world's most crucial waterways, the Strait of Hormuz, have reached levels unseen in years. US President Donald Trump recently raised the stakes with Iran by sending bombers and also a carrier battle group to the Gulf. But Trump now seems to be backtracking. He's insisting that he does not want his maximum pressure campaign to boil over into an open conflict. And there are reports that the US is seeking back channels to defuse this latest crisis. Iran has since come out accusing the US of escalating tensions in the region. The country's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said his government was not ready to talk with the US now, but that it would act with restraint despite the recent deployment of US ships and bombers to the region. Trump's determination to confront Tehran was reportedly fueled by an intelligence report that cited an imminent threat from Iran to US forces in the region. Other countries, however, have downplayed those threats. But the US felt it was urgent enough to pull out all non-essential diplomats in Iraq, citing those security concerns. And tensions between the US and Iran have steadily risen since Trump pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal and reimposed sanctions on Tehran. So, are the US and Iran headed for a clash that could disrupt one of the world's most strategic waterways? Or is Trump's bluster just a symbolic show of force? Well, joining me now to answer all of this is Abbas Aslani. He's Director General of the World and Foreign Policy Department of Tasnim News Agency, which is actually based in Tehran. And also Vehbi Baisan. He's Assistant Professor at the History Department of Ibn Khaldun University right here in Istanbul. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on Straight Talk. Abbas, you have flown in from Tehran. Tell us, what is the mood like there? What are people saying about this escalating tensions?
Well, in relation to the likely conflict between Iran and the United States in the region militarily, inside Tehran, it seems much less likely than it seems from a far distance. And if you go to Tehran or other parts of Iran, you would see that the Iranians are having their normal life. And in relation with those threats or the talks by the American officials, not only they have not been worried, but there are jokes going on in the country. And if you look at the economic section of the country, you would see that they have not been impacted by these talks between Iranian and American officials in this regard. And as a result of the American withdrawal from the nuclear deal, Iranians tried to make a recent nuclear announcement. And that was why, because they think that the Europeans could not compensate the Americans' withdrawal from the nuclear deal, and Iran wanted to say that it means business and the country is serious this time, and if they cannot compensate and deliver on their promises, Iran will go toward the gradual withdrawal from the nuclear deal. And the second, I think, point is that if Europeans or the remaining members of the nuclear, they cannot fulfill their commitments, I think that will prove one point, and that is their ability or inability to resist the American pressure and to make that the point that geopolitically they are irrelevant if they do not have the United States on their own side.
Okay. And Vehbi, the picture there that Abbas has painted of the reaction to the crisis is quite different from the way it's being portrayed outside Iran. Tell us, are we right now seeing a sort of backtracking? Has Trump miscalculated?
Well, Trump seems this time quite sending really strong signals towards Iran that actually this time they're very serious and they will, if any attack for proxy war may be as well, will be considered attack on US and they will react. But the problem is that we do not know what is it that Iran constitutes danger. You see, so that's very ambiguous.
Yeah.
So what is the threat? I mean, so if we don't know this, I mean, I really searched for it. And so when they sit on the table, we don't know what the negotiation is going to be. So because nothing much left on the table, as the same one like US didn't even bother providing some convincing argument about the withdrawing from the nuclear deal. So that's the same situation. So what they want from Iran. But I know Trump's talks in the UN opening ceremony in 2018. He was saying that Iran failed their people and the regime is guilty of this. But actually, do you really threaten a country for these unexplained reasons? But nevertheless, just recently Trump asked, or the Trump administration asked their American citizens to go out of Iraq. So they're giving signals that they will attack. But then why? We still don't know. We can, of course, we have guesses. We know what, they blame for Yemen, they're blamed for proxy war in Syria, and we know they support Hezbollah openly in Lebanon. But, I mean, if at all, they're doing this for many years. And why now? It's never explained. But I'm feeling, and unfortunately, this time it's very serious.
You say it's very serious. And I want to ask you, Abbas, about John Bolton. How is he portrayed in Iran? Because for a very long time, he's been calling for regime change and also to bomb Iran. I have his op-ed here from the New York Times, 2015, to stop Iran's bomb Iran. Tell us, how is John Bolton seen in Iran?
Well, John Bolton has been, in fact, in line with some opposition group which have been considered as terrorists, even not by Iran, but also the international organization for long. And they have been giving addresses and speeches among them. But he is considered as a hawkish and war-friendly element in the United States who have pushed for withdrawal from the nuclear deal. And they put 12 conditions vis-a-vis Iran set by Pompeo. But now Trump says that the only thing they want is that Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. That's exactly from a Western viewpoint that the JCPOA, meaning the nuclear deal, was supposed to do. They pulled out of the deal, but now they're talking about this issue, meaning that they left a negotiating table and a framework which was endorsed by United Nations Security Council resolution, but now they're talking about negotiation with Iran. And Bolton is considered to be in a team called by Iranian Foreign Minister as B team, including John Bolton, bin Salman, bin Zayed of United Arab Emirates, as well as Bibi Netanyahu of Israel. So these four people in different parts of the world have shaped and formed a group who is pushing toward more escalation and tension in the region. And in Iran, also the view and the perception of Bolton is a hawkish person who has been pushing for war. And the groups he has been supporting is not welcomed back in Iran. They do not have any base inside the country. So I think, and he also suggested a plan for withdrawal from the nuclear deal in 2017. And that was how to go out of the nuclear deal and then to leave the issue of negotiation rhetorically possible and open. And that's why it is that in the case that the Americans are not really after negotiation, because they left the negotiation and the table, but they want to have another negotiation at a different table, ignoring the other parties and countries in the world.
And Vehbi, I want to ask you about Turkey, because it cooperates with Iran and also the US. How does this situation right now impact their relationship?
Well, actually, we share with Iran over 500 kilometers of border. To be precise, it's 560 kilometers. So it's a very long one. And same as Syria, we have a very long border, and the domestic war there actually ended up for Turkey costing so much. We have here around 3.5 million, what we call Syrians currently in Turkey. I mean, in the last couple of months, a lot of our trade relations at least slowed down because you can't really build up a strategy. You don't know what's happening and what US wants, and they're always threatening hitting Iran. As John Bolton, Abbas quite rightly explained it, they're like a cowboy strategy. First shoot and then ask. So, I mean, you cannot really dominate the world politics this way. So, for Turkey, it's very serious. Turkey never want their really immediate neighbor to go into any type of war because we have alliances, we have brotherhood. For centuries we are living together. This border has not been changed for centuries. So that's why Turkey is very concerned. But Turkey has very little to really interfere in the matter. most probably they will mediate in between the two countries to find a peaceful solution. So for Iran, they have to find a viable exit strategy. So as much we trust Iran's diplomatic skills, then we will, wait and see. But Turkey, the last thing wants to see is that anything happens to Iran and we have the refugee flows coming in.
And Abbas, if this crisis does calm down, because we have seen some mediation by the Swiss and also the Qataris overnight, who can claim victory, Iran or the US?
Well, we have to wait and see what comes up, but whether the Americans are ready to negotiate and come back to the negotiating table, because that was they who left the table. But I think if there is any chance that the Americans, they were arguing that by more economic sanctions, they can bring a better deal with Iran, but they have shifted toward the advocacy of a military options, and I'm not seeing that far from now that they will be shifting from military option to be forced to come back to the negotiating table. And I think the one who can claim victory on this issue is the international community, which isolated the United States as a result of the country's withdrawal from the nuclear deal and ignoring the other international partners and countries, not only vis-a-vis Iran, but in relation with other international agreements and accords. So if that thing happens and Americans come back to the negotiating table in the framework of the nuclear deal, that will be a victory for Iran as well as the international community.
And Vehbi, last thoughts on this. How will this impact the region going forward?
Very badly, very badly. We have past experience. Americans involved in Afghanistan created a failed state. Look at Iraq, we have another failed state. What Iraq is got to do with the September 11 attacks? Nothing, but they paid a heavy price. And Syria, again, a failed state. Yemen is there. We don't know what's going to happen there too. So this is going to further destabilize. I think as a great superpower, a force, America should work for the positive future of the region. We need more stability. We need more peace initiatives. I think any kinds of these threats and even an attack will further destabilize. Look at it from Shia point of view. Perhaps in other Shia populations in other countries, we'll see it as an attack on Shia, etc. So it's going to be in a mess. So I think nobody wishes to see this, but US certainly should be more constructive force in the region, establishing peace and security.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have spoken for much longer on such a crucial issue right now. Abbas Aslani and Vehbi Baisan, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on Straight Talk. Turkey's armed forces have been considered a pillar of the NATO alliance for a very long time, but they've not always had easy access to the latest military hardware. Throughout the Cold War, it's endured multiple arms embargoes and also had unreliable sources for equipment. And that uncertainty forced Turkey to develop its own weapons industry. And that push, according to the latest statistics, seems to have paid off. Over the years, the country has sharply reduced its weapons imports. Instead, it's been producing its own local homemade equipment. And now Turkey has ambitious goals to sell even more arms in the not too distant future. Can Hossasu has this story for us.
With the second largest military in NATO, Turkey's armed forces have for decades been a major regional power, engaging in UN-sanctioned missions to counter terrorism operations. Now, as Turkey moves into the international arena as a defense manufacturer, more countries are taking notice. Recent deals have included Turkey's sale of 30 attack helicopters and 4 warships to Pakistan, 6 unmanned aerial vehicles to Ukraine, and 10 attack helicopters to the Philippines. Once a massive net importer of arms, Turkey is now moving to become a leading weapons exporter. 4 of its companies have already broken into the ranks of the world's top 100 defense manufacturers. One promising company is Turkish drone maker Baykar, who are now looking to repeat its success at home in foreign markets. This drone, the Bayraktar TB2, provided critical and tactical support to the Turkish armed forces in northern Syria during Operation Euphrates Shield in 2017 and Operation Olive Branch the following year.
Once you prove your technologies within the country, then you have huge advantage on exporting these items. Now we are exporting our armed drones, for example. We are exporting our corvette ships, lots of communication equipments, radars, guidance kits.
And it's not just weapons that Turkish defense firms are focused on. With security risks changing to more asymmetric type threats, Turkish software companies like Havelsan are pushing the country's cyber capabilities.
We are telling our customers that we are ready to share our codes with them. We're not like our competitors, who are providing standard systems that can't be customized. We are developing the best fitting solutions for their needs and involving them in the process. Our systems give more confidence to customers in terms of cybersecurity.
To reach its ambitious goals, the SASAD, a Turkish association that oversees the country's defense companies, will make sure that no opportunities are wasted.
The defense industry without foreign markets can't go beyond a certain level. Turkey has already passed that threshold. Turkey is a country that has proven itself in the international market. Besides North Africa, the Middle East and Turkic states, we are establishing partnerships with Western countries too.
With targets to hit $3 billion in exports this year, Turkey's weapons makers are aiming high. Turkey's defense industry was born out of necessity. After a series of arms embargoes and regional threats, Turkey looked inward to ensure it will never lose the capability to defend itself. But now the country's defense companies have bigger goals: to become a leader in the global arms trade. Can Asasu, Strait Talk.
And joining me now is Merve Seren, who's assistant professor at Ankara Yildirim Beyazıt University, and also Andrei Frolov, who's editor-in-chief of Arms Export magazine, based in Moscow. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on Strait Talk. Now, I want to start by asking you, Merve. You've worked a lot on Turkey's defense industry. It's an incredible story and trajectory. It's gone from being a mass importer of arms to now wanting to be a mass exporter of arms. How did this come about?
Well, Turkey experienced so many things, actually. Well, first of all, let's start with its NATO membership, because Turkey has joined the NATO club in 1952, and since then she immediately replaced under the security umbrella of this transatlantic alliance. Besides that, Turkey was also benefited and assisted from the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. However, this political, positive atmosphere was started to change in 1964 when the political climate was changing in Cyprus issue. Actually, you're remembering that the famous Johnson letter, it was like directly threatening Turkey not to use the NATO weaponry, NATO inventory, if there's something like if Turkey is ever wanted to conduct an operation to the Cyprus. But however, after 10 years later, Turkey decided to operate in the Cyprus, and this peace operation was taking place. And with that, embargoes was started to be placed by the United States, and it has taken like 4 years. 4 years arms embargoes, and at that time Turkey had to even take its munitions from the Libya. It was a very sad story, because you were just faced the first disappointment from your NATO ally in 1974, but it triggered Turkey's it showed the importance and the necessity for nationalization of the defense industry. And since that time, it was very important, because it was the critical turning point for Turkey. It formed the Turkish Armed Forces Strengthening Foundation, and today this foundation company has got so many companies, and now these companies are at the top 100 defense companies list. So, for instance, Aselsan, it was in 2016, it was placed like on the 93rd row, but now it's on the 55. So it was a very huge, actually, like working and efforting. But you know that it's very much related with the political and economic atmosphere as well.
Okay, thanks so much for laying that out for us. That's the history, how we got here. Now, the future of Turkey as a global arms exporter, how do you see that, Andre?
So, Turkish case is a really success story, even from the Russian point of view, because now Turkey became and becomes the real competitor of Russian arms industry. And moreover, sometimes we are fighting at the same markets, and I think that thanks to Turkey's allies, for example, Qatar, Turkey's arms industry has a lot of prospects, and his future is fruitful. Because, for example, this year I think Turkey can reach $2 billion in arms sales. It's a very good milestone. And I think maybe in 5 years or maybe in 10 years, Turkey can reach $5 billion per year in arms sales. So it's a real big figure. For example, maybe compared with Israel or Germany.
Okay, and talking about big figures, Turkey has a goal within less than 5 years to actually reach the tens of billions. Is that realistic, Merve, and does it have the capacity and even the markets for this?
To be realistic, actually. In fact, the market is very competitive. So you don't have to be just technically competitive, but you have to be competitive in political and economical in terms of this, in the dimensions. What I mean, if you're technically competitive, but if you do not have political influence, and if you don't have diplomatic capability, and if you are lacking like the financial support, then it is very hard for you to become competitive in the future. Besides that, long-term planning, realization of the projects and the mass production, and you know, at least holding the intellectual capacity inside the Turkey is also a critical factor that for you to become competitive in the future.
And Andrew, you mentioned that you compete. Russia and Turkey compete. It's a success story, and yet Russia is the second biggest arms exporter in the world. What does Turkey need to do to get even higher?
I think first of all, every development in military affairs is based on 2 points. I think first point is a big investment from local clients. For example, Ministry of Defense, Turkey Ministry of Defense has to invest more. And the second is maybe cooperation. And I think that possible cooperation in R&D with Russia may give both countries a new leap and new step forward.
Interesting points. And now I just want to understand, and for our global audience to understand, what exactly does Turkey make? What is it famous for?
Well, actually, I think Turkey did lots of things in different forces. All right, so but most of the time in the media we're just seeing like the air force, like the drone system. But on the other side, Turkey is like building its own tanks, its self-propelled howitzers, its anti-drone countermeasures like jammers, and it's also like I think also Turkey is very famous now with the armored vehicles. I think the products, the variety of the products are increasing day by day. But what are we selling is that I think so far we started to sell our helicopters, we started to sell our corvettes, and we started to sell our drone systems. So the 3 are the exporting things. But when we are looking in the private sector, the private sectors are also exporting like the armored vehicles to Malaysia, and they're cooperating with it. They're also selling to the Indonesia as well.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about the dispute, the arms dispute that has been in the headlines so much, the S-400s and the F-35s. Andrei, how is this seen from Russia?
From Russia, it's obvious kind of political pressure on Turkey from the United States, because everyone in Russia understands that there is no any real competition between F-35 and S-400, and there is no real threat to security of NATO and Turkey from S-400. Just political question.
It's just political. And Merve, I want to ask you, has this dispute encouraged Turkey to say, we need to be more self-reliant and keep making, our own weapons even more?
Yes, of course, true. But you know that I think we have to keep in mind that Turkey is very committed to instant alliance and partnership. But this alliance doesn't have to be something like obligation. Do you understand what I mean? So for many years, Turkey's relationship between the United States and NATO was built upon the over-dependency. But now Turkey is stating that our relationship must be built upon partnership, like the loyalty and commitment, not over-dependency. So, of course, this reality triggers Turkey to invest more in its national indigenous products as well.
Interesting. Merve, Seren, Andrei Frolov, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Straight Talk. It's been great to talk about the Turkish arms industry. Thank you both of you.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Maria Ramos. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.